Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
And I'm Leah.
And today we're going to continue trying to answer the question, could your favorite food be going extinct? And last time we talked about a couple of examples. We mentioned wheat and cocoa.
And today we're going to continue on to see if there's anything we can do to save some of our most popular or most essential, most needed foods that are out there.
And so, yes, indeed, we talked about wheat last time, and we talked about cocoa, and we suggested that you should try to eat some organically grown chocolate in order to help save cocoa in the future. Today, we're going to be talking about some other foods, such as tuna and honey. So let's get to it, everybody. Let's read the entire contents of our lesson, and we'll be back to talk about it. It's not only farmed crops at risk, animals and animal products are also disappearing. Learn how you can help to save two of our most essential food resources. Tuna. Overfishing has affected numerous fish species, but none more so than tuna. Three major tuna species, skipjack, yellowfin, and bluefin, are dropping in number, making the fish's future uncertain. Fishing methods have a great deal to do with this. Commercial net fishing often catches not just fully grown tuna, but also juveniles not yet mature enough to reproduce. This makes it harder for tuna to restore their numbers. There are also inherent problems with eating these large predatory fish, as their loss echoes down the food chain. If you want to ensure your fish is sustainably sourced, examine tuna cans before you buy them. Ask about the origins of your fresh fish and research which fisheries use sustainable practices. Honey. With the decline of bee populations around the world, honey is also in jeopardy, not to mention the many other food crops we rely on bees to pollinate. One major cause is a lack of food. Single crop growing practices and urbanization have left bees starving and weakened their immune systems, making whole hives vulnerable to collapse. To support bee populations, you can grow bee-friendly flowers and plants outside. When shopping for honey, try to source it from a single beekeeper who's more likely than a massive producer to care about their bees' health over the bottom line. By pausing to carefully consider our food purchasing decisions, we can all help to promote more sustainable production and prevent the disappearance of our favorite foods. Make your next trip to the store a thoughtful one.
Okay, everybody, so we're here on January 5th, and if you remember, yesterday we were talking about crops that can face extinction, like wheat and cocoa. And it's not just crops out there, farmed crops, that are at risk. We'll see here. It says it's not only farmed crops at risk. Animals and animal products are also disappearing. So these areas, animal products and animals themselves, are also being affected. And what we want to do is we want to learn how you can help to save two of our most essential food resources. We actually want to save as many as possible, but these are just two examples that we have here. They are two of our most essential, so our most basic food resources.
And the first most basic essential food resource is tuna. Tuna is quite common here in Taiwan. It is very much a part of the diet here. And overfishing has affected numerous fish species, but none more so than tuna. So overfishing means they're just taking too many fish out of the ocean. If people love seafood so much, then they tend to fish for food too much. Maybe you should mix up your diet a little bit and not have so much seafood, but seafood is tasty to some people, and I guess seafood is actually very nutritious as well, so that's probably asking a lot for people to cut down on their seafood. But we're going to focus specifically on tuna, and there are three major tuna species: skipjack, yellowfin, and bluefin, and they are dropping in number, making the fish's future uncertain. So I didn't really know much about tuna myself, but I guess there are three major species, and here are the names: skipjack, yellowfin, and bluefin, and all three of those species species are going down in number. They're dropping in number. There are fewer and fewer of them swimming in the ocean, and therefore that makes the fish's future uncertain. Are tuna going to go extinct? Well, maybe.
With yellowfin, you can imagine that its name comes from it having a yellow fin or some yellow fins, and the same with bluefin. And then skipjack has stripes going up it. And I think I read that skipjack has like the biggest muscular skeletal system of like so many animals out there in the world. So it's quite a powerful little creature, that one. And going on to the next sentence, it says, fishing methods have a great deal to do with this. So the way the fish is taken out of the sea can affect the number of fish that are out there. That's what is causing our overfishing. So what are fishing methods? Well, is it a guy going out with a fishing rod and sticking it in the water and catching one fish? No. We're talking about commercial net fishing, and that often catches not just fully grown tuna, which would be great because those guys are ready to be eaten, but also juveniles, not yet mature enough to reproduce. So it's also getting the younger fish that are out there, the ones that haven't had a chance to produce more baby fish. And that's what happens when you reproduce. You create more of yourself. So if a mother and a father reproduce, they probably made you.
They all did. Somebody reproduced to bring you into the world. So, of course, that's what they want to do with tuna. They don't want to kill the kids. They need to let them grow up and become mature so they can reproduce and produce more baby tuna to swim in the ocean and grow up and then end up on your dinner plate. So this makes it harder for tuna to restore their numbers. That is understandable, of course, if the kids are being killed along with the adults, there's nobody left to replace the adults, so they cannot reproduce when they become adults.
There are also inherent problems with eating these large predatory fish, as their loss echoes down the food chain. So inherent, this word means built in. So there are some problems that have been there right from the beginning and have always been there. They are built into the situation. With this, we have problems with eating predatory fish, large predatory fish. So I'm guessing they're calling a tuna or tuna in general large predatory fish. Predatory means you go after prey. So they're not sitting there and eating grass and munching on it and going, yum, I like this. They're looking for other live animals to eat. They are predators looking for their prey.
Right, so these are problems that are inherent with eating. And, of course, we're talking about large predatory fish. And, again, I guess tuna go out there and kill other fish, so they're predatory. And their loss echoes down the food chain. So you won't have tuna eating smaller fish. Those fish will continue to exist, and they'll probably increase in number, and they'll destroy fish further down the food chain. And so the food chain will be affected, and that will affect the kind of fish that our beloved fishermen can catch. And if you want to ensure your fish is sustainably sourced, examine tuna cans before you buy them. So here we've got sustainably. That's an adverb from the adjective sustainable, and we often talk about things being sustainable when they can be easily reproduced and you can keep using them over and over, like sustainable energy, for example, like solar power and wind power. You don't have to worry about running out of that power. As long as the sun is shining, then we're going to have that power for billions of years.
And this is a phrase you will often hear coming out of people's mouths these days about looking for something that is sustainably sourced. So it comes from something that can be replaced again. What they're really talking about here is kind of critical consumerism. You go into the shop and you pick up your can and you go, what's in this can and where did it come from? You're being a critical consumer. You're not just going, I want tuna, taking a can, any can just because it's the cheapest or the prettiest label. You're actually being critical. You're analyzing the situation and going, do I want this? Well, this one's more expensive, but it comes from a sustainably sourced product. So I think I will choose this one.
Exactly. So I guess if you go to your traditional market and ask the vendors there where they got their fish, then you can decide whether you want to buy it or not. We got this from Farmer John down at the harbor, and he uses net fishing. Oh, no, I don't want that. I don't know if you can actually do that, find out exactly how it was fished, but this is just a suggestion here. So yes, you might want to ask about the origins of your fresh fish and research which fisheries use sustainable practices. Research, I guess you could say it both ways for the verb. That just means to look for some information. A fishery is a place that catches and produces fish for people to consume.
And that's about all the time we have for right now, so let's listen to our teacher.
听众朋友大家好，我们昨天提到因为极端气候全球暖化的关系，导致有一些食物也濒临灭绝，例如小麦跟可可。我们今天还要谈的是鲔鱼跟蜂蜜哦。那么鲔鱼为什么会濒临灭绝呢？主要的原因就是因为过度捕捞，它出现在 Tuna 这一段的第一句第一个单字Overfishing。 那因为过度捕捞其实不只是鲔鱼啦，它影响了很多不同鱼类的物种，那么受到影响最大大概就是鲔鱼这一种。因为鲔鱼呢主要有3种不同的种类，正尖、黄鳍鲔鱼还有蓝鳍鲔鱼。这3种主要的种类，它们的数目正在减少。那么数目减少这件事情，就使得鱼类的未来变得非常不确定耶，因为整个食物链是环环相扣的。不过我们要特别注意一下这一段第2句话，看到一个逗点之后的 making， 感觉上像是分词构句，但它其实是一个关系子句的简化。也就是说，逗点之后的 making 其实是 which makes， 而 which 这个关代它代替的是逗点前面从句首开始的整句话。好，所以3种主要的鲔鱼种类数量减少的这一件事情 which makes 使得鱼类的未来变得非常的不确定。那么捕捉的方法是跟这一件事情有很大的关系，因为现在捕鲔鱼啊、捕鱼啊、过度的捕捞啊，他们通常都是用商业的渔网来捕捞。那么商业渔网不仅会捕获成年的鲔鱼，还会捕获到还没有成熟到可以繁殖的一些幼鱼。我们接下来看一下第3句。第3句这里呢，其实先看到的是一个Not just 逗点之后 but also， 你可以把它抓出来，这就是不止 A 而且 B。 好，所以 commercial net fishing 所谓的商业渔网捕鱼，它通常抓到的不只是这些成年的鲔鱼，逗点之后 but also 同样是一些 juveniles。 juvenile 可以把它画起来，因为这个所谓的少年或者是幼鱼后面加的是一个简化之后的关系子句。那么后面我们可以直接先把 not 到句尾左右括号，它简化的是关代 which 或 that 跟 be 动词的 are。 那这些所谓的幼鱼呢， they are not yet mature enough to reproduce， 他们还不足以成熟到可以繁殖。那这样就很糟糕啦，如果本来生了很多小鱼会长大，我们还可以吃，现在捕捞的时候连小鱼都全部捞起来了，那么这样子的状况就使得鲔鱼很难恢复原本的正常的数量。当然第2个原因是因为我们如果吃这些大型的掠食鱼类，本来就会有一些基本 inherent problems 一些问题，因为如果我们把这些大型的掠食鱼类呢吃掉之后，在食物链当中也是会造成一些影响的。所以同样这一段第5句逗点之后的 as， 根据上下文这个文意来推断呢，其实这里的 as 是 because 表示原因。好，所以我们到底要如何来解决这个问题呢？如果你想要确保你的鱼是可以持续的取得，那么在购买之前就可以检查一下你的鲔鱼罐头，可以看看这个鲜鱼的来源到底是从哪里来的，研究一下有哪一些渔场采用永续实践的方法。
We're going to take a short break now, but please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everybody. We've already talked about tuna. So one kind of an animal that we want to make sure we try to protect so that it doesn't go extinct. Now we're going to talk about an animal product, and that's honey. So honey is something that is produced by bees. Bees flit around to different flowers, and they gather up nectar, they gather up pollen, they dip in nectar, they gather up pollen, they bring it back to the hive, and they produce honey. And farmers take the honey out, and they let the bees keep producing more and more honey. And that's the normal cycle of how that usually works. And you can buy raw honey or processed honey in stores. And depending on the honey is really interesting because depending on where it's produced, it can often have flavors from the flowers that the bees actually visit. So you can taste a little bit of where those bees are getting their good flavor, their good flower flavors from.
Indeed, and of course, for me, this is kind of not related, but when studying Chinese, I often get honey and bee mixed up. Mi feng and feng mi. I always mix those up because those two characters are just simply switched to mean something else. So I often say, hey, let's go to the supermarket and buy some mi feng. And oh, you want to go buy some bees? Ha ha ha, very funny. Oh, I meant feng mi, actually, but yes, that's kind of difficult in Chinese. But let's talk about the decline of bee populations. So with the decline of bee populations around the world, or because we have a reduction of the number of bees in various places in the world, as a result of that, honey is also in jeopardy, not to mention the many other food crops we rely on bees to pollinate. So here, if something's in jeopardy, that means it's threatened, it could disappear, or it could be damaged severely if we don't do something about it.
So it's in danger, right? And what is in danger here? Well, we have fewer bees around, possibly because of many different reasons. We're still kind of trying to figure that out. Some people say maybe the chemicals that are put on crops are causing bee populations to die. But we're actually having some serious problems with bee populations around the world. And that's dangerous because, well, honey will then be in jeopardy, which means we won't be able to get it. And that's really scary. If you like honey at all, well, you will be a very sad human, and I am one of those. And then there are also the other things that will be affected by the decreasing bee populations, and that's the other crops that we rely on bees to pollinate. So maybe a bee will go from one pumpkin flower to another pumpkin flower, and by doing that, pollinates the pumpkin flowers, and we get pumpkins. So what happens if there's no bees? Well, someone has to do the job of the bees by hand, or we lose pumpkins.
Right, and lots of vegetables and fruit rely on pollination. So pollen is the actual powder in the flowers, and the verb is to pollinate, to move that pollen around from flower to flower. And, of course, that process is called pollination. Now, one major cause is a lack of food. One major cause of the decline of bee populations is a lack of food. The bees just don't have enough to eat. Single crop growing practices and urbanization have left bees starving and weakened their immune systems, making whole hives vulnerable to collapse. So, yes, we've got these single crop growing practices that we talked about last time. A farmer just grows cocoa every year or just grows wheat every year. They don't rotate their crops. So if you do that, then that can weaken the immune systems of the bees and it can starve them, which means they don't get enough to eat and they die. And your immune system, of course, is how you protect your body from diseases with antibodies and stuff like that.
So if there's a lot of urbanization going on, it means that more and more cities are popping up, and it's harder for, crops to be planted when there's more and more cities and larger human population. Then there are fewer and fewer places for, crops to be planted and fewer options for bees to go and wander around and get food from. And with their weakened immune systems, we talk about this a lot. You always kind of want to strengthen your immune system by healthy eating or by taking your vitamins, or by exercising, or by going out in the sun and getting some vitamin D. This will keep your immune system running very well and keep you healthy, hopefully. But if these bees have their weakened immune systems, well, that's going to hurt their hive. And their hive is where the bees live, as we talked about before. And it affects their hive by making them vulnerable to collapse. And that's one of the things that's been talked about a lot lately with the reduced bee populations, is this collapsing of these hives. People are trying to create honey. They're trying to let the bees live and be happy. And all of a sudden, the bees just disappear. And this is happening quite a lot. If you're vulnerable to collapse, it means you are weakened. You are easily going to collapse. You are vulnerable. You're weakened. And collapse here means to fall apart or to just disappear. Like we talked about decimate yesterday. It's just going to be something where the building is no longer there. It has fallen down.
Right, and then we won't have honey, and the bees won't be able to pollinate plants and stuff like that. So to support bee populations, you can grow bee-friendly flowers and plants outside. That's something you can do. If you live in an apartment in the city, well, you can still make your contribution. You can grow plants on your balcony, and the bees might come and pollinate the flowers and take the pollen and pollinate other plants and things like that. So you can help out those bees with those flowers there. And that's something you can do. And when shopping for honey, try to source it from a single beekeeper who's more likely than a massive producer to care about their bees' health over their bottom line. Of course, the bottom line is how much money can we make? Of course, that's the bottom line of a lot of companies. Hey, we're here to make money. We don't care about the environment.
Right, and you get the single beekeeper. So if you remember yesterday, we talked about single origin coffee. This is becoming more and more popular, or returning to popularity, focusing on that local guy down on the corner who is your local beekeeper. He's one single beekeeper. He's going to make sure his bees are happy, and he's going to do that better than a massive producer. This is a fun word to say. You have to say it sometimes with a little bit of like lengthening the word. Massive. That makes it sound even bigger than it is. But massive just means that it's really big, right? It's huge. So a huge producer of honey doesn't care about the bee's health. All he really cares about is, well, he wants his money once he gets that honey produced and put onto the market. And this is, again, as we were talking about before, your critical consumerism. So you're going in there, you're looking at your can. What's in my can? You're looking at your honey. Where is my honey made? I want this honey, but it needs to be made with honey instead of high fructose corn syrup or, just sugar and water. It needs to be honey. So you're being critical about what you're buying. You're making sure you're buying good things.
Yep, I think there are quite a few local bee producers or honey producers here in Taiwan, or beekeepers, and I think you can probably buy their products at farmers markets and stuff like that. So check that out, and you might be helping the future of food production in the world. Keep those bees alive and don't worry whether they sting you or not. And let's wrap things up now in the final paragraph. It says, by pausing to carefully consider our food purchasing decisions, we can all help to promote more sustainable production and prevent the disappearance of our favorite foods. So this is just kind of summarizing things here. Of course, we need to pause to think about our food purchasing decisions, realize the origin of the food that we're buying, and buy foods that can help out the environment and stuff like that. So yes, if we consider our food purchasing decisions, we can help to promote those sustainable production methods, letting farmers rotate their crops and stuff like that, and to buy honey from local producers. Then, of course, we can prevent the disappearance of our favorite foods, and we don't need to worry about starving to death.
Right. And again, we're going to wrap up with the thing that I keep coming back to. Make your next trip to the store a thoughtful one. Thoughtful means you're using thought. It's full of thought, right? You're thoughtful. So a thoughtful thing to do is to give someone flowers on their birthday, or to get your mother some chocolates for Valentine's Day. I'm a mom, so of course I'm going to plug that one. But it's a thoughtful thing to do. You're thinking about the other person. In this situation, we're asking people to think about the things they're purchasing. Put some thought into it when you go out and buy things. Use your critical consumerism to find things that are good for the environment instead of supporting things that are bad for the environment. Some people might call this woke thinking, although sometimes woke is considered to be a bit of a negative term. Oh, you're so woke, or why don't you get woke? And that's W-O-K-E. And that just means, being aware of things that are socially right and maybe morally right and good for our society as a whole and thoughtful. And yet at the same time, it can be a little bit overdone sometimes with woke.
So that's a new term that has crept up in the language recently, so you should know that, to be woke. But indeed, we want to be thoughtful about what is happening in the world of animals there. So yeah, we need to protect our bees to get our honey, and we need to protect our tuna, and in the future, hopefully, we won't have food shortages and stuff like that. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Let's listen now to our Chinese teacher.
好，接下来我们就来谈另外一种了，所谓的蜂蜜。蜂蜜真的很甜，很好吃啊。可是随着世界各地的蜂蜜的总数的减少，蜂蜜也很危险了。我们看一下这段第一句，第一个这个 with 介系词，它在这里表示原因。当然，我们是根据上下文的文意来做一个推断。那么，蜂蜜现在很危险。那当然不用去提到我们所依赖蜂蜜授粉的那些粮食作物咯。既然没有蜜蜂减少的话呢，那么蜜蜂要授粉的粮食作物也会濒临绝种。那么到底什么样的原因会造成这样子的状况呢？主要原因就是因为缺乏食物，因为单一作物的这种种植方法还有都市化，让很多蜜蜂都找不到食物，没有花也没有花蜜，它们就挨饿，然后削弱了它们的免疫系统。而这件事情让整个蜂群非常的脆弱，也容易崩溃掉。所以同样这一段第二句，我们看到后面也就是比较接近句尾的地方有一个逗点，逗点之后呢有一个 making， 在这里不是分词构句哦，它是非限定用法补充说明关系子句的简化。好，我们先把逗点之后的 making 还原成 which makes， which 代替的是第二句整句话，也就是前面 one major cause 一直到逗点 systems 的这个地方，在这件事情上面，也就是蜜蜂挨饿，因为单一植物的这个种植方法还有都市化的关系，让他们整个挨饿，然后免疫系统也不好。这件事情就使得 making whole hives vulnerable to collapse， 就整个就是蜂群就是崩溃掉了。所以为了要支持蜜蜂的群体，其实你可以在户外种植一些花朵植物，而且在购买蜜蜂的时候，尽量要从单一养蜂人那里取得，因为他们会比较关心蜜蜂的健康，而不是整体的盈亏的状况。当然在这一段当中，我们看到后面有一个补充说明的关系子句，先行词是 a single beekeeper， 逗点之后的 who 到结尾则补充说明单一养蜂人的状况。那么当然我们这2天只能够简短的提到几种濒临绝种的食物，那么如果你有兴趣的话，还可以 Google 更多的资讯哦。我是安娜，我们下次见。
That's it for today's lesson, everybody. Hopefully we can all pitch in and do our part to save our food, because we certainly don't want to be fighting over a loaf of bread in the future or a tuna sandwich. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson. Thank you for joining us. Please join us again next time. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
Bzz, and I'm a busy bee working on being thoughtful as I'm buying things. Leah.
And I'm Tom. Goodbye.
Bye.